Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. The sign out in front tells you so. You know, we talk about a lot of local things around here, local issues around here, but when it's baseball season or football season, you guys know I'm a sports guy first. This guy has been in my life for going on 3.5 decades as the longtime Houston Oiler writer. I saw he shared some old Oiler Digest pieces out there from the 80s that I'm sure came in my mailbox every week. John McClain, it was you and the Oiler Digest, and when the wrestling magazines came, and maybe a little Rolling Stone, maybe Playboy back in the 80s, that I was excited about it. But, man, when you showed those old Oiler Digest, I said, man, we've been at this a long, long time now, 25 years into having a football team here. But really, you come to Maryland all the time. You snuck in and out of here a couple weeks ago, didn't you?
I did. My wife and I have a home a cottage that we're redoing on the bay on the Western Shore. And while it's being redone, we stay at a place called the Anchored Inn in Deal, which is a little, real cool, small place on a marina that's close to our place where we can go keep up with it. And we have our favorite places. LP Steamers was not open. It was, while we were there, we were really bummed. But we have every other place we like. We love it. Our place, Nestor, is about 20 minutes from the Naval Academy, 30 minutes to the Nationals ballpark, and 35 to Camden Yards. Those are the only thing that I have measured time-wise. We love Baltimore. We didn't get to Baltimore this time because we were in and out, but I love to come there, love to stay on the harbor, and I can't wait till I can finally come up and stay and not leave when I have to leave when I want to leave. In our place, it's called West River by Galesville. It's been in my wife's family since 1929, right on the water. You'll have to come out when it's done.
Hold on, man. I'm Googling this now. I see Skipper's Pier and Anchored In at the Hidden Harbor. I mean, I drove down 301. Jen and I went down to North Carolina about 8 weeks ago. We drove down 301. So I was, in between Upper Marlboro and where you are, but I have never literally been down that side of the bay and the Chesapeake Beach and, getting down to Prince Frederick. I've never really made that drive.
Well, where we are is very, very isolated. There's no chains of any kind around. It's all local eateries. The only time we did not eat on the water was when we were in downtown Annapolis, but it was really close to walk. We walked down afterward to the harbor, and every time we're up there once a year, we go to St. Michael's for a day because we love going over to the Eastern Shore. So someday when I retire or get put out to pasture, I'll be spending a whole lot of time up there. And I told my wife 3 years ago, I said, well, by the time I retire in 7 or 8 years, maybe the Orioles will be good again, and we can go to a lot of games at Camden Yards, which is still our second favorite ballpark, and to all these other retro parks. We've been going to Camden Yards, Nestor, since the week it opened, and my old buddy Richard Justice was covering for the Washington Post, and he made sure we had great tickets, and loved going to the ballpark there. But, man, I feel for the fans, but I do hope with all those high picks and these young stars they're drafting that it works out like it has with the Astros, minus the trash can banging.
Well, our mutual friend Richard Justice was the Orioles beat writer when I got my first job at the Evening Sun. He was working for the Morning Sun at the time. And, those were the good days. And now we're where we are. And I want to appeal to the Hall of Fame football writer in you and the guy that's been covering Houston football through 2 franchises and just, all the stuff that you do in your sports fandom as a Houston Astro fan, long-suffering before they cheated and won a championship a couple years ago. But this sort of little run of the last couple of weeks of trying to watch basketball games in a bubble and hockey games in a sort of an iced, it looks like a blimp to me. It's crazy watching these hockey games. Baseball in silence and fake applause. Where are you in all of this? I mean, you've flown up here. You've flown back to Texas now. You've been to hot spots. They're trying to put football games. I want some wisdom from you, John McClain.
I think it's fun. I think it's exciting because it's unprecedented. Hopefully, we'll never have to experience this again, but I know people don't want to hear it. But I'm worried about next year, too, the way the country will not do what it's supposed to do, like the medical experts keep telling us. But as it is now, it's 60-game baseball season. In the Marlins case, they're going to probably hope they play the fewest number of games, and other teams don't have outbreaks like the Marlins. I don't think they're going to factor in the playoff race. But wouldn't it be something if, say, it came down to the end, but in winning percentages, and the Marlins had the highest winning percentage because they played fewer games because of the coronavirus, so you could say the coronavirus worked to the Marlins' advantage. Now, that's not going to happen, of course. The NHL jumping right into the playoffs with these play-in series and with baseball with no fans watching the background noise at Fox, the people. I think it's good that they're selling. If you send a picture, they'll put you on a seat for $100 that goes to charity. I like that. I like anything that goes to charity. And I feel bad that the Orioles, for the fans of Baltimore, that the Orioles are not better. I remember when I went to Camden Yards the week it opened, I think there were 44,000 fans. And did they average 40,000 that first year?
3.6 million. Yeah, it was. John, I mean, I geeze when I tell these stories because I was in my 20s at the time and just starting up in sports radio, and I had hair down to my backside, and like I'm growing my pandemic hair here now. But they did a thing when Camden Yards was open in 1993 into 94, before the strike and then even after the strike, where they did a thing called Moonlight Madness. And what they would do is they would open the club level for the great unwashed like myself. And they would have Santa Claus and the players sign an autograph. It was a winter carnival that they would do right around December 10th, December 15th, which is right around the time you're signing players, right? You have the winter meetings. It's keeping baseball alive, and they would have Christmas lights and give out candy canes. And they would open the box office so you could buy your tickets, and Santa could leave them under the tree. And they literally would sell out the entire season. The entire season would be sold out before Christmas. And if you had 2 tickets to see the Tigers on a Tuesday night in May, on Chuck Thompson appreciation night or whatever it was, you felt like you were the luckiest person on earth Christmas morning that you had 2 tickets to see them play someday in August, and you just hoped that by God. And then interleague play. Oh my God, we could see them play the Astros, John. Oh, that's right. They're going to move the Astros into the American League. So all these old things you go back to, but I do remember how hot a ticket it was. And look, you were a part of the Astros when no one wanted to go and then everybody wanted to go. This thing blows hot and cold, right?
Oh, yeah, we've seen it. We saw the Astros down worse than any team in baseball where the Orioles are now. I've got 2 old stories about Baltimore. Number one, when I was a kid, like so many people, when I say a kid, I'm talking about when I was like 8 or 9 years old.
I'm doing the math on that, and I'm worried, John. I'm confused.
When I was 8 or 9 years old, I had a Johnny Unitas uniform.
Okay.
And the Cowboys had not started. And so this would have been 58, 59, right after they won the championship. I love Johnny Unitas. Don't really know why, but I did. I guess I'd watched them on TV in the playoffs, and I watched games with my dad and grandfather every week. So I had my Johnny U jersey, and I used to go out and throw the football to myself in the backyard, and I would be an announcer, and I'd announce about Lenny Moore and Raymond Berry and Jimmy Orr and John Mackey and those great skill position teams. And so then when the Cowboys started in 1960 and the Oilers started in 60, they were Texas teams. So I became a fan of those teams, but I still like the Colts. So Johnny Unitas to me was larger than life. And one of my biggest regrets, the last season that the Colts were at Memorial Stadium, the Oilers played there at the end of the season. I went down to the sideline, and at this time, I'd been covering the NFL for 6 years. And so I went down the sideline as they let the media do, used to let us do, so we could walk into the dressing room afterward. And Johnny Unitas is standing there. And I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say something. And I went over and stood right behind him, and I thought, man, you've shrunk. you're larger than life. You know, you're big as God. And I'm looking at him. Of course, he was the same size he always was. And I'm sitting there, and it's probably the only time I've ever been speechless. I wanted to tap him on the shoulder, but I didn't know what I was going to say, other than the fact that I'd always been a big fan. And so then the game's over, and he starts walking. I start walking. I never did it and never got that opportunity. And one of the first times that I was, since I was on the beat, and they were playing the Colts, and I got a call from the Colts radio network asking if I could be on a pregame. And I said, sure. And they told me where the box was. I think we were in the dome. And I knew that, Chuck, I used to read about legends in baseball broadcasting. I had a book called The Ballparks of Every Ballpark in History, coffee table book, and I got this in the early 70s. So you can imagine how it's changed. And I also have a book that also has audio in it from every famous broadcaster of every team with their greatest calls. So I knew all about Chuck Thompson. And I had no idea that he was doing play-by-play for the Colts. And they told me I'd be on with Chuck Thompson. And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm on with the legendary Chuck Thompson. And I went into the booth, and, of course, he treated me like royalty, and everything came off okay. But that's my Johnny U and my Chuck Thompson. I got one more.
Go ahead.
Raymond Berry.
Okay.
So in 2006, I'm at Pro Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Canton. I used to go every year. And at that time, I was inducted by the Pro Football Writers of America. It voted me in the Dick McCann Memorial Award, which means you're on a plaque in Canton forever. It's the greatest award you can get covering the NFL.
John Stedman's name's on that award, so you know it's
good. Yes, it is. So I was there, and I was up at the head table. There's like 5 rows on the top dais, and I'm sitting next to Raymond Berry. And my dad could not make it. He was about 85, and he was blind. And so I was talking to Raymond about growing up in Texas and SMU and the Colts. And he said, well, where'd you get to be such a big football fan? I said, my dad. And he says, your dad here tonight? I said, no, he's blind. He's back home in Waco. And he said, well, you know what? Why don't you give him a call? Do you mind if I talk to him? I said, are you kidding me? So I called my dad. He answers the phone. I said, I need you to pay attention. Somebody wants to talk to you. He said, have they had the induction yet? I said, no, that's tonight, but pay attention. I answered the phone, and Raymond Berry goes, Curtis, Raymond Berry, class of whatever. And I can hear my dad, he talk loud. Since he's blind, he thought he had to talk louder. Raymond talked to him for 10 minutes, and I had to get him off. And Joe Schmidt, the great middle linebacker for the Lions, is on the other side of me, said, can I talk to your dad too? And I said, well, of course. I took the phone. I said, Daddy. He goes, my God, that's Raymond Berry. I said, really? I said, well, there's another guy who wants to talk to you. Joe Schmidt talked to him until the program started, and I always appreciated those two guys, but especially Raymond Berry stepping up. My dad loved the time of the old Southwest Conference, and Raymond was always one of the greatest players, and, of course, one of the greatest players in NFL history as well, and I always appreciated that so much.
Man, you got such better stories than me. John McClain on NFL. You can find him and the Houston Chronicle and watching the Astros and watching sports. You know, the stories I have are like watching Earl Campbell, and the night I met Earl Campbell in Dallas and sat on his lap. So, you know, I was an Oiler fan, and you covered the team that I loved as a kid. And all these years later for football, we've had, you know, strike issues, contract issues, you know, all of these things that could keep the game away in some way. We've played replacement games. They made bad movies about it. I'm worried about the integrity of all this, John. And I guess that's what I'm speaking about so much is, do they really think they're going to play a Super Bowl in Tampa? Do they really believe they can get there? And what will the teams look like by the time they get there? And what will these weeks when whole offensive lines get wiped out by COVID in various places around the country?
First of all, Nestor, you know they're going to play because they want to make that TV money. Every team gets $296 million before they sell a ticket. So, yeah, they'd like to have a few fans. I don't think there's going to be any fans in NFL games or college football games, no matter how greedy the presidents and the ADs are in college football. But I think the NFL has that big television check, but so does college. The problem with college, and Eric, that Virginia Tech corner Caleb, the safety, cornerback. There's a story on Pro Football Talk in which he tells why he left Virginia Tech, and it's scary to think they're not testing and they're letting them not wear masks and be together and within 6 feet of each other. And you wonder how many other college programs are doing that. And so in the NFL, they're spending a lot of money, millions of dollars, every team. I think they have BioReference in the parking lot like they do in Houston. They're paying $2.34 million where you can get tested, get the results back the next day. If you get tested in the morning, you get them back at the end of the day. I'm about to get tested 3 times over 4 days next week before 10 media people get to watch them run around in shorts and T-shirt. And they're spending all the money. They're doing everything they can in the facility. J.J. Watt told us 2 days ago it's like a Terminator movie, everything you have to go through, and everybody's trying to find their way. But until they actually play a game, Nestor, and this is why I thought they needed a preseason game, we're not going to know what the fallout is going to be after they do everything right for 6 days and trust players when they leave the facility not to be mutton heads like Clippers guard Lou Williams and go to a strip club knowing that he's not supposed to do it. And he would have gone back and not told anybody if he hadn't been outed by his buddy's social media account. So trusting these players to do what they're supposed to do when they're 25-year-old multimillionaires who are single and asking them not to go out and chase women and hang out with their friends and stay out of the strip clubs. That's one thing I worry about. The other one is they spend 3 hours bleeding, sweating, blowing snot, spitting on each other, and then they get tested the next day. What is going to be the fallout of that? Houston and Kansas City play first game on a Thursday night. They'll get tested on Friday. They'll know the results on Saturday. They'll continue to get tested. But before other teams play on Sunday and Monday, they're going to know what the test results from the Texans and the Chiefs were. And what if you're right? What if it is an entire offensive line? I think if the integrity is not how many you have, but who you have. You get Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, you have those guys out, your season's in trouble, just like it would be if they blew out a knee. So that's what we're not going to know, but at least the other teams will have an idea what they're up against when they see what happened to the Chiefs and the Texans.
The thing that I've come to the conclusion that once this thing began is no matter what, right? And I've talked at length, John, about where this thing was in Wuhan back 7-8 months ago, where the meat wagon shows up, everybody's in a white hazmat suit. The Terminator thing that J.J. Watt talked about, like that sort of vigilance for every case and contact tracing and all the things that societally we have not done. I mean, I was down in North Carolina with my wife 6 weeks ago. I was appalled, right? Just at how we're not taking this seriously. And I go back to Rudy Gobert, and I go back to stopping March Madness back in March, where we had that Wuhan moment. We had that moment where the meat wagon showed up, everybody was in the white suits, and we're like, stop everything. Now we're just going to go ahead and do this. And I don't know where the plank is, man, where Doug Peterson comes up dirty on Sunday night. He's the guy that's supposed to be standing in front of the players saying, you can't be out doing all of these things that they're doing. And, John, I've compared this to safe sex. It's an honor system. Did you? Yeah, sure you did. Well, then how did this happen? How did this happen with the Marlins and the Cardinals in baseball last week? And my concern is no matter what. My concern is you got a coach that's sick. All right, great. The coach has it. Is it going to take a hospitalization? Is it going to take a spouse, a sick spouse? I don't know. But where's the edge where they say we're not going to do this? And where do the players get involved to say there's enough of us who don't want to do it that it's not worth baseball doing it anymore? And I don't know where that ledge is, but I get the feeling that we're now getting to the point where no matter what, or we'll know it's not safe when we see it. When who sees it? Rob Manfred? I mean, at what point are they going to deem this not cool anymore?
I think somebody's going to have to die, and the odds of an athlete dying are minuscule because they're young and they're in shape. They could go in the hospital. Freddie Freeman was in the hospital. Others have been in the hospital. But I think somebody would have to die, or you would have to have a Marlins outbreak in which people were a lot sicker. Now, when they put those players on two buses to drive them from Philadelphia back to Miami,
Who's
first
driving?
thing I thought about the poor bus driver. I hope he's getting quadruple overtime. And there's two of them, two bus drivers, obviously. But if those guys had been very sick, they'd be in a hospital. They wouldn't be on a bus headed back. So we hear COVID-19, and we're like, oh, my God. But the fact is, more people do die from the flu, but this is the most contagious. And the one person I would not listen to is a politician. I do not listen to politicians. I listen to medical experts, especially ones at the Houston Medical Center, which is the best in the country, maybe the best in the world. I want to know what they think. And they all say sports are taking a huge risk, and it may not turn out well. And if an entire offensive line went down, where's the integrity, as you mentioned? What if half your defense went down? And something else to think about, Nestor, we're not even talking about the normal run of injuries that teams have. And if you think back to 2011 when they had the lockout, it's documented that there were more injuries that season, more of the soft tissue injuries. So this year we got to think there's going to be more. They weren't paying a lot of attention to concussions in 2011. Now they are. So besides all the regular injuries we're going to have, you're also going to have the COVID-19 guys. So it's going to be chaotic. It's like Bill O'Brien told us, the teams that are the most disciplined when they leave the building may be the ones that have the most success.
John McClain can be found at the Houston Chronicle and McClain on NFL, on Twitter, tens of thousands. Follow him. You should as well. Last thing, and maybe it's a little bit of a mixed question because I can throw you the Daniel Snyder softball, so I'll let you go on that because we are, you were in the area, obviously, in Maryland, as we talked about earlier, and where the future of that is, and just how far this whole thing's gone from the Orioles and and the Redskins owning this whole region to being where they are. But the media side of this, and you said you're going to go through the hoops to get in, and obviously Luke Jones does that on my behalf with the Orioles. I mean, Luke's been out at Camden Yards all week covering the Orioles. He'll be out at Owings Mills when they allow him. I think we're done touching athletes for a long, long time, John. I don't know what kind of access you'll get. Probably some special access from the people you know with the Texans and Bill O'Brien. You may be in a room with him once or twice or in a personal Zoom with him or whatever, the way you would communicate normally. But I'm wondering the next time I'm going to literally be in a room with John Harbaugh or Eric DeCosta, who I have some of the similar privilege that you have in Houston with, or the next time I'll be in a room with Lamar Jackson. I'm assuming I'm looking at 22, 23, a long time from now. And then when this happens, how sports is going to allow media to ever come back. I know you watch the Premier League and you see European soccer. I think maybe the leagues will be locking people like you and me out a little longer than maybe than we believe here in the early guy. I'm very worried about the access of what we do for a living.
That's a great point, Nestor. I will not see anybody in person this year, and only personal things I'll have is if I talk to them on the telephone. And today, players are scared to death to give anybody the number. Some of them do, usually veterans, but not the young guys, because the PR people read them the Riot Act, not to take calls or give out their number, emails, but you can DM them. And I would hope that the NFL, which is still very PR conscious, that they would make sure next year, if things return to normal for the players, they would return to normal for the media. But this year, nobody's going to see anybody in person that I know of. We will not have anything but Zooms here like the other sports, and that's just, that's the way it is. We're all in the same boat. And one of the things somebody pointed out, and I agree, instead of all of us having access to the same quotes, do it like it used to be before writers started going in the dressing room. Write what you see. Use your opinion, color, whatever. But write what you see and depend less on quotes. And so I'm intrigued by everything. I'm excited about it. Every year as we get closer to the season, it's my 44th covering the NFL, and I get excited like I did when it was my first one, especially when you think you got a team that's going to be good. It's not like covering the Orioles where going in, they're going to be competing for the number one pick again, and you hope, because as a writer or a broadcaster, because the fans are more interested when your team wins, that they will turn the corner. And but as far as the NFL, it's I'll be going to Kansas City for the first game. I'm not sure after that. We're going to have protests. Bill O'Brien has told me in the off season, a huge story. He'll take a knee with his players. So that controversy is going to crank up again. So there's so many things for us to be interested in about covering sports that we've never had to deal with before. I think that makes it more exciting, Nestor.
Well, I'm looking in my personal flight for Southwest Airlines, and the only flight that I have in here, the first flight, is to Houston, Texas, to see the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens on the 20th, which is week 2. So
you come in early, and I'll take you to a place where there's social distancing and of course everybody here has to wear a mask. When I was in Maryland, everybody everywhere was wearing a mask, and I was so impressed at downtown Annapolis where they've taken out streets and let people set up their tables outside. But even a lot of people outside were wearing masks, where here, if you're outside, they refuse to do it, and it's caused a lot of problems, and some people take issue still with not having to wear a mask going inside. But I was very proud, and I felt very safe being in the state of Maryland.
Well, I'll tell you what, you'll call it home soon, and there will come a day when we're COVID-free and the Astros aren't cheating anymore, and the Orioles may be a 500 team, and we can have some crabs together, you and me here.
I look forward to it.
John McClain, he is in Houston, Texas at the Houston Chronicle. Always a pleasure to visit with him. You can find him at McClain on NFL. You can find me out at thebuyatoyota.com, Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world for all the stuff we've been doing. We are merging Baltimore Positive with WNST.net, kind of putting them together. So you'll see how that's going to turn out in a couple of weeks as we launch something new around here. My appreciation and deep gratitude to John McClain for spilling some old school Johnny U love, as one day he'll trade that Texas ID and become a Marylander. We'll give him a cowboy hat. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and Baltimore Positive.